Why did you decide to focus on high-frequency trading for your book?
I'd gotten interested in studying markets, but coming to markets from the sociology of science and technology. 2009, 10, high-frequency trading, which had been going on for at least a decade, but pretty much under the radar, suddenly started getting into the news. It started getting denounced left, right, and centre. And so I kind of think, oh, that's an intriguing area.
What were some of the most surprising things you learned from your interviews?
The great pleasant surprise was how willing people in the business were to talk to me. And talk to me kind of meaningfully, because I'd had an earlier little adventure trying to study statistical arbitrage, looking for patterns in prices that you can profitably exploit. And I found that deeply frustrating as a topic, because I'd be interviewing people in that area. Would they tell me what patterns they were exploiting? Well, of course, they wouldn't, because that was their edge, that was their alpha. So the interviews always remained at a sort of rather unsatisfyingly abstract level. Suddenly, I found with high-frequency trading, people were prepared to tell you, not in complete detail, of course, but pretty concretely, what they did, or more precisely, about what their algorithms did. And so what I realized was that there was a core of common knowledge in high-frequency trading. These were price patterns that everybody knew about, and everybody knew that everybody knew about. So there was nothing to lose by talking to this Scottish sociologist.
How did your perspective of the risks and benefits evolve?
One thing that has surprised me is how relatively few episodes there have been of the kind that I must admit I kind of expected, which is where there's a bug in some trading program, and it causes the firm whose trading algorithm it is to blow up. I mean, that has happened. That has happened, but it's happened less often than I thought it would. And similarly, kind of one of the big events when I was starting to study high-frequency trading was a so-called flash crash of May 2010, if my memory serves me right. And I was kind of expecting that great convulsion that there was in US stock prices that day, that would be repeated time and time again in different asset classes. And analogous things have happened, though never actually, I think, quite at the scale.
How has high-frequency trading and financial technology evolved since your book?
One of the classic price patterns that's absolutely central to high-frequency trading is the fact that the Chicago stock index futures tend to move just a tiny fraction of a second before the prices of the underlying stocks and ETFs move. So I was in New York giving a talk back in April, and I asked the people, is that still the case? And they told me yes, that in their experience that was still the case. So that the bread and butter of high-frequency trading, so to speak, is simple patterns of that kind. And that's, of course, what gives the field its arms race in speed characteristic, because if everybody knows that a major influence on the price movements in stocks or ETFs is what's happening in the index futures in Chicago, then it becomes a race to get the fastest signal from Chicago. So you just get a tiny microsecond, and literally microsecond, or even these days nanosecond edge over other trading firms. So there's continuity there, but I think the thing that is changing is the increasing use of machine learning to find patterns that human beings don't necessarily expect to be there, and that maybe even are hard for human beings to understand when the algorithm finds the pattern. So that, very struck by the story in the Financial Times a couple of days ago that AQR, which is one of the classic statistical arbitrage firms, which had been resistant to this style of machine learning-led trading. They were, I think, more confident trading on stuff that they felt they understood, that they're loosening up a bit on that. I mean, they still say, we can kind of see the patterns that the machine learning discovers. We can kind of understand why they are there. From classical high-frequency trading, which was the machine following the instructions of the human programmer on how to do things like how to analyze an order book, to the situation now where machines are, so to speak, let loose to find their own patterns to exploit. Still, I need to say, of course, under close human supervision. I don't imagine that even nowadays there are trading firms who just switch the machine on and then, they go out and have a beer and then come back a couple of hours later to see how it's gotten on. I'd be very surprised if such firms exist, or if they exist for more than a week or two. But, there is that change in the practice of automated trading.
What projects are you working on now?
I'm currently researching digital advertising, online advertising. And I actually confess I got interested in it because one of the people who I always see when I go to Chicago had started out in automated trading and then had moved over into that world. And I got intrigued by the similarities and differences between high-frequency trading in finance and the buying and selling of digital advertising opportunities. And both are high-tech activities, but in a different kind of way. In many senses, what's high-tech about high-frequency trading is speed, and how you achieve speed using microwave links, millimeter wave links, shortwave radio, even if field programmable gate arrays, FPGAs, rather than sort of classic computer systems. The trading of digital ads is not a speed game. Search for something on Google that's commercially attractive, or if you go to a website that's funded by ads, there's typically an auction going on in the background to show you the ad. And of course, it's not human beings bidding into those auctions. It is, again, algorithms bidding in. But typically, they're given of the order of 120 milliseconds to bid. And if you say 120 milliseconds to a high-frequency trader, they're just going to laugh. They're going to say, well, that's a lifetime. But what it lacks in speed, it makes up for in the sheer number of auctions that take place. And my best estimate is that there are more than 2 trillion digital advertising auctions worldwide every single day. Kind of mind-boggling kind of number. 2 trillion auctions. So that's the kind of thing that I've been pursuing, is to understand, well, first of all, why are there so many auctions, and what are the implications of the different ways in which the auctioning system is organized.
How do you approach research?
The way I like to think about it, that a major project takes me on average 10 years. Say the work that I did on nuclear missile guidance. That was a little bit shorter. I mean, I kind of got the idea in the early 1980s. Did my first interviews in 1984 and published the book in 1991. So it's not quite a decade, but almost a decade. High frequency trading, very similar time scale. The digital advertising stuff may be a little bit quicker. And the reason it takes a decade is that it takes you time to get your head into a new area. There's really nothing better for learning than going to speak to the people who actually do the stuff. And that takes time. Yeah, I looked a few years ago at the very first interview I did, and I thought, oh my God, Donald, how could you be asking something as basic and naive as that? But of course, that's how you have to start. That's how you learn. So that's my approach really to multidisciplinarity, is go find practitioners who are prepared to talk to you and quiz them about what they do and why they do it.
What advice do you have for students wanting to get into research?
Stay concrete. The best work is often done by somebody taking a deep dive into a particular topic rather than sort of spreading a bit too thinly, because by and large, actually, economists with all the modern natural experiments techniques of the discipline and so on are better at that kind of thing. So if you're doing things in the way that I do, in other words, qualitative, fieldwork-based, interview-based stuff, you've got to find the right concrete topic. And of course, you don't always get it right. I have a big mental file of bad research ideas that I had pursued a bit and then discarded because I realized they weren't actually going anywhere. So, I think to any young researcher, that's what I would say, have the idea, try it out for a bit. If it isn't coming together, set it aside, put it down to experience, and then try the next thing.